Welcome to Saturday and round 7 of the 2025 World Superbike Championship. We're almost underway for the third practice session here at Donington Park. Let's cross over to our colleagues trackside for all of the action.
A taste of what they can expect in the race conditions. It's a long race, over 20 laps here at Donington Park, but yesterday there did seem to be a few concerned faces in that Rocket BMW Motorrad garage. Not so many concerned faces necessarily in the Bimotor garages, with Alex Lowe's third overall on timing sheets yesterday with his FP1 lap time. He was one of the only riders not to improve their lap times in FP2.
Yeah, Alex did a 20-lap run yesterday, so at least has the knowledge from FP2 of what to expect in the race.
So here we go to the man who was between Bulliga and Alex Lowe's on the timing sheets. Danilo Petrucci in second position, around about 0.2 of a second slower than the number 11 on that factory Aruba Ducati. And Petrucci, obviously a rider who has come here in the past to Donington Park, been very successful. He had his first podium here back in 2023 in race 2, and he's had a very good pace so far this weekend. 2023, sorry, actually was a year where we also had sort of hotter conditions that we usually would expect at Donington Park. It does seem to be something, Steve, that could be favouring a bit the Ducati. These sort of low grip conditions. We have quite a few riders who are quite far up the timing sheets. Yesterday, Scott Redding was very good here. Ryan Vickers actually on the Motor Corsa Ducati obviously has a lot of experience around Donington Park, which he hasn't necessarily had at other tracks this year, but he was 8th on the combined time sheet. It seems that compared to previous years, it is something that is suiting the Panigale V4R a bit more.
Yeah, it does suit the Ducati, and the high track temperatures played into that yesterday, but it was just so close yesterday. There was a second between the top 18, 19 riders. Tommy Bridewell, you can see there in the 46, actually a second off the pace yesterday and 19th fastest. So it just shows how tricky it is. For Bridewell on the Honda, if he had found a quarter of a second, he moves up to the top 15. If he finds half a second, you move up into the top 5. And it just shows how difficult it is for the riders out there.
It's extremely difficult conditions for all of the riders, but we continue through look at the riders on track right now. Obviously this 20-minute session, free practice, we will give it a bit of an indication to these riders of what to expect later on and how they've been able to adapt the machine from yesterday. Sam Lowe's was one of the riders who was trying a few things yesterday. He was 4th on the combined timing sheet, did quite a few laps on the harder SC0 tyre yesterday during free practice too, getting a bit of information of that, and it does seem to be a bit of a knife edge for some of the teams in terms of which option they go for. Yeah,
it's a question mark of whether or not you go for the harder tyre or the softer tyre. Typically with the standard tyre, a lot of the Ducati riders haven't really liked that tyre. They prefer the Development X tyre, but everyone seems to be able to make it work here relatively well. It's just a question of whether or not it's got the longevity, and that's where everyone will have a decision to make in this afternoon's race. You'd imagine that most riders will opt for the softer tyre and take a bit of a gamble for race 1, but some will opt for the harder tyre, and we'll see if it pays off for them. Just in relation to Lowe's on the number 14 Ducati, he's the rider to keep an eye out for in the Superpole session. He'll be fired up for that one. He's already got a pole this year. He'll be looking for a home pole.
He has been a rider who's been very competitive in Superpole conditions, and that has kind of been the difference for a lot of riders. You mentioned sort of the gaps that we have on the timing sheet here at Donington Park, but it's something that we've had a lot this season, where 2/3 of a second can really be the difference between 2-3 rows on the grid, and it conditions your entire weekend. Sam has been one of the riders who has been able to take advantage of that and have that little bit extra for the Superpole position, which kind of explains his position. That's Iannone. And that is a big issue to have early in the morning for the number 29.
Gets off the track at least, but that looked like he had the problem on the exit of turn 4 and went through turn 5, which is the fast section of the track as well, into 5 and up towards Schwantz. That's where we saw the smoke initially, and looked like he was able to pull off to the side of the track pretty early, but we'll wait and see if there was any fluid down close to the line. But yeah, for Iannone, the last thing he needs is more issues. He had a couple of excursions yesterday, no crashes, but ran off the track a couple of times.
Yeah, we'll see where it all started for Andrea. It actually started on the start-finish straight, so that is quite a long bit of the track really. Oh, and there was a big moment coming to turn 1 as well, as one of the riders ahead of him. So unfortunately that will be the session over for the number 29, and it just remains to be seen how much work that Go 11 team have before the Superpole session.
Obviously as well, a lot of the fluid gets caught in the belly pan. That's the job of that section of the bike, so hopefully we've got no real issues out there, but it looks like the red flag has just gone out. So for Iannone, it's the end of the session for him, and for all the riders. There's delay. That's the fluid on the track there, and one of the Hondas down. It looks like Tommy Bridewell
and Michael Van der
Mark
Mark
as well.
Tommy Bridewell and Michael Van der Mark both down. I think they're that first corner, and confirmed on our timing sheet is both of those riders. So unfortunately, we do have red flag conditions, and obviously race direction forced to stop this free practice 3 session, assess the conditions right around that first sector of this Donington Park circuit. So an unfortunate start today for all the riders. Still 16 minutes left on the clock when we can get the session restarted, but not an ideal way to start a Saturday morning, given also that there's not all that much time before the Superpole session, only just 2 hours before we get underway for that.
Yeah, 2 hours, so we know that Go 11 has work to do. They'll have to change the engine on that bike. But for Van der Mark and for Bridewell, their teams will have work to do now as well. And you'd imagine that's the fluid into turn 1. We saw that Iannone had the problem down the straight into 1, and then he ran all the way through to turn 6. So did half a lap with that fluid going down, and there'll be a lot of work for the marshals to do to get that section of the track cleared up.
So we're going to get a replay of that incident here, and we catch just the tail end of it. So I'm not sure if that was to do with the fluid or if it was just an incident with 2 of the riders coming together at the same spot of the track.
You can see for Mikey, though, immediately gets up to check on Bridewell there, and they'll obviously know that that's fluid on the track that's caused that. Neither rider to blame for that at all, and it's just unfortunate.
It is an unfortunate situation for both of those riders. We'll give an update in terms of when this session can be restarted as soon as we can, but for the time being it is red flag conditions due to those issues for Iannone and that crash that we've seen between Bridewell and Van der Mark. That gives us a bit of a moment to go over more riders on the grid. We did have a few laps come in this session. Ezekiel Lecuona actually at the top of the timesheet with a 1:27.2, but of course not representative lap times so far in this session, with a lot of riders still yet to actually complete a full lap. This man, actually, Nicola Bulega, was one of them who wasn't able to complete a full lap before that red flag came out. Going back to Lecuona, now at the top of the timesheets, but I think it misrepresents a bit the position which the Hondas were yesterday. An extraordinarily difficult day for all of the Hondas on track here at Donington Park. It has historically been a bit more of a difficult track in recent years, but perhaps more than expected.
Yeah, 18th, 19th and 20th fastest for the Hondas yesterday, so nowhere near where they need to be. And when you spoke to the team principal, Jose Escamat, he was very clear that they knew that this was going to be a tough track, a tough weekend. And for the project to be as advanced as it is, so many years into it, and still have those tracks that you know are just going to be almost impossible for the bike, that's a pretty damning indictment of the progress that they've made with the bike. And for Honda, there's no two ways about it. It's been a massive disappointment, and they need to make big changes for next year. You have to wonder as well in terms of some of the changes that Honda have made in recent years on the bike, and some of the back and forth they've gone this year. For example, they've returned to their previous suspensions provider that they already had 2 years ago. Those sort of changes where they go back and forth with the bike, they've had new homologations but haven't necessarily completely revolutionized what they had ahead of them. There is a sensation sometimes that there isn't necessarily that much of a clear path. It's a sensation that actually we did have perhaps during this season, ironically, actually, for the first rounds of the season, there was some consistency from some of the Hondas. So to come here to Donington Park and then see that completely reverted, it's perhaps even psychologically even a bigger blow than it would have been in previous seasons. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where we've seen some shots of light from them and signs of encouragement, but ultimately there's still the question mark about how good the bike is, how good the riders are, and how good the team is. And probably until we see a change there, we won't really know the answer to any of those questions. And that's where for Honda, another 2 years of Lecuona and Vieira, is that the answer for them? And that's the big question that's being asked at Honda right now. So we can see the marshals working on track. I believe that's the inside of turn 3, potentially that could be from the camera angle. Looks like turn 6 there, where we saw Iannone pull off the side of the track. What's interesting is down Hollywood, Craner curves down into the old hairpin. The marshals have already left the track, so there must have been much fluid left down at that part of the track. So it was just at the end of the run for Iannone, whenever he pulled off the track, that it looks like there's that bit of fluid down.
Non è esploso il motore. No, ma infatti immaginavo anch'io, perché andai troppo piano per spaccarsi. Non è esploso, secondo me hanno montato loro qualcosa che non hanno avvitato.
My Italian's not too good, but exploso.
Mine is fair enough. No, he was actually saying that the engine did not explode. He said non exploso motore. If my Italian, my very limited Italian, is to be is to be treated, well, it should probably be treated with a grain of salt, but I did understand that the engine didn't explode in those conditions, so perhaps not as much work as necessarily the team might have thought originally.
Yeah, and sometimes with the engine in that situation, you can see there that the smoke comes out. It's not always where the engines are right off, it's just where you can end up with the oil and the fluid all just burning off through that part of the usage. But for Ian One, we'll have to wait and see. We'll get the engine usage reports as well, so we'll know for sure probably at the end of this round where he sits in that regard. But for Bridewell and for Van der Mark, we saw them both back onto their feet and back to the pits, but that'll be the end of their sessions. There is a second bike that riders are able to jump onto, but then they have to keep that for the rest of the weekend. So typically you only want to make that change during a Superpole session, or more typically during races.
And to be fair, given the issues that Andrea Iannone and the team have had over the past 4 or 5 rounds, potentially that's something that they'll try to avoid at any cost, because it's very early on the weekend, and what we've seen from them is that there has been a tendency really to have crashes or have sort of incidents, even technical issues as well, which have conditioned their last few weekends. It has been certainly an extraordinarily difficult 2025 season so far for the number 29, and perhaps unexpectedly so, given how strongly they started the season back in Phillip Island with that podium finish and with strong pace in all 3 races. So unfortunately, we still are under red flag conditions, but good to see the fans out in force here early on at Donington Park. It is a fantastic weekend to come to the track. In fact, has been in recent years in this July slot, and good to see the fans in early to support some of the local riders as well. This is Tommy Bridewell's bike, which is back into pit lane, so a bit worse for wear as well. A lot of damage to that bike and a lot of work to do for the Honda Racing UK squad before the Superpole later on. Unfortunate as well for Bridewell, because he was yesterday on par with the other 2 Hondas with Lecona Vieja. Admittedly, that was quite a way back on the timing sheets, but it has been a positive performance from his side so far, and positive to see that Honda Racing UK unit inside the paddock once again, getting another wild card, working alongside the factory team. They've been working a lot alongside them in recent times, and good to see them on track here again this weekend.
Yeah, and certainly for the team, one of those situations they're trying to just gain that experience out there and understand that package. As a development team, they actually do a pretty good job. There's a lot of experienced heads in there. We saw into the garage, the likes of Chris Pike is there, and Chris will work as the crew chief for Tommy Bridewell here and in BSB, but Chris was Johnny's first crew chief whenever he came to World Superbikes on the Tenkate Honda, and a lot of experience there for Superbikes. And that experience counts for an awful lot as well, because Honda don't really have that experience in their factory team. A lot of the crew have come from Moto 2 and Moto 3 backgrounds, and that'll probably help them with the super concession rules and being able to make big changes to the bike down the line. But for Honda to have that Superbike experience in the development team is important.
He was working, if I'm not mistaken, alongside the World Superbike project when it was run by the Tenkate racing team as well, up until around 2018, 2019. So he's somebody who still was around the World Superbike paddock for a long time, and experience which will come in handy, because as we were mentioned earlier on, it has been a long time for Honda since we've been able to see them at the sort of level which has been associated with the brand in the past. So pit lane will open in 2 minutes, so it seems that the track is clear now, has been given the go-ahead from race direction to get this free practice 3 session restarted. It will be 16 minutes and a half on the clock for all of these riders. We see Axel Bassani now in that Bimotor box. Axel Bassani, one of the riders who had a crash yesterday in the free practice 2 session, hasn't had the sort of pace that his teammate Alex Lowe's has so far this weekend, but coming off what was all in all a positive weekend at Misano in terms of his overall pace, it could be a good weekend as well for the number 47 to really be able to make that sort of step forward that his teammate has made already. Yeah,
he didn't really have an awful lot to show for Misano in terms of end result, but it was the best we've seen from him since he switched from a Ducati. And we saw him qualify well, we saw him perform well in the races. Obviously the crash with Bulica is the headline from the weekend, and then the penalty for that also conditions race 2. But for Bassani, at least we were able to see a lot of progress for him.
Good to see Michael van der Mark back into the box. Good to see him on the seat as well, and the team will be working hard to repair that bike and get, at the very least, a couple of laps under their belt to be able to see if everything is up to date for the Superpole later on.
Had a good chat with Mikey yesterday as well, and he felt that the bike was good here this weekend. He's been having fun on the bike, which is something that we haven't really seen from Mikey through the course of this season so far. So hopefully for him, they're able to get that bike repaired for the Superpole session, and he's able to qualify well. If he can put it up on the front 3 or 4 rows of the grid, it gives him a chance in the races.
It's good to see Mikey in better spirits this weekend and with better pace, because I think, to be fair, in Mizano was perhaps the most frustrated that we've seen the number 16 World Superbike in a long time.
Yeah, and you don't tend to see that frustration from Van der Mark. You think back over the years, whenever he's been with Honda, Yamaha, or BMW for the last number of years, you never really see it boil over, but it definitely boiled over a few times over the course of the last couple of rounds, and that's a bit of a indication of where the team are at right now. And Sven Blush, you spoke to him yesterday. We spoke to him as the media at a roundtable on Thursday, and he couldn't commit to what BMW were doing in 2027. There's obviously there's a well-known option clause for them to continue working with Sean Muir and his team for 2027. They haven't activated that clause yet, which means that right now you can't offer anything to anybody, and they're trying to say, well, it could be a 1-year deal, it could be a 2-year deal. Riders don't need that. They need stability, they need security, and that's where being able to come out, probably by the time we get to Hungary, or definitely over the course of the summer break, that's when BMW at board level will make their decision, and in all likelihood, you'd imagine, confirm their option with SMR. Then you're able to offer 2-year contracts to people, and then you're able to see where you can be for the future, because they need to aim big for their riders. They need to aim for Jack Miller, if he's leaving MotoGP, is on their shopping list. They need to aim for the likes of Jonathan Rea, or someone that they can take to Munich and say, this is our chance to be able to replace Toprak. So difficult to replace Razgadi Oglu, but they need to aim big if they're keeping this project alive.
But that uncertainty, Steve, also means that where in the past potentially we would have been speaking a lot about whether BMW were committed to keeping Van der Mark in a team as well, you come to a sort of situation in which the question can also be, is Van der Mark committed to continuing with BMW if they're not able to offer some sort of those stable conditions, and if they're not able to also be able to offer a package which really fits his riding style and what he needs right now on the grid.
And that's the one thing. He knew last year's bike with the super concession frame did suit his style. He finished 6th in the world last year. He had a really good season. He won a race, had some podiums, qualified well, was able to race and fight at the front. He can't do that with the standard package this year, and that's the problem. Mikey's biggest problem ultimately is the fact that the only BMW he can be compared to in the world is Toprak, and Toprak is just a different kettle of fish to every other rider. If you still had the independent bikes or another official team like Bonova were last year, and you could compare him to Scott Redding and Garrett Gerloff again, Mikey probably is looking okay. But he's being compared to the best rider in the world, or best rider in Superbikes, and he ultimately is coming up that bit shorter than what the team would expect. But that's also more than likely where the bike is, and Toprak is just showing what he can do to make that massive difference.
That sort of comparison is something that we've also spoken about in the past with whoever's been on the factory Ducatis. We've always had one rider who's been, let's say, a step above the other, and that's always put the second rider in that sort of weird position. But we were just seeing Nicola Bulliga now a few moments ago. It's something that up to a certain point is affecting his teammate Álvaro Bautista. A very strange situation given the fact that Álvaro Bautista is a 2-time world champion on that Ducati, but having that pace deficit with his teammate has really conditioned how we look into the future into 2026. And Bautista, one of the riders looking for a ride in the 2026 season, still actively looking for it, given that a few weeks ago it was confirmed that he wouldn't be continuing with the Aruba Ducati squad. But it is one of those situations where when you're with a teammate who is so strong, it really puts all the work that you put into the project in a different light than it would be if you did have somebody who was simply also suffering the same sort of issue we would.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the conundrum that's always faced by teams whenever they've got that special rider, the rider that makes the difference. You think back over the years when Kawasaki had Johnny Rea on the bike, he was the band-aid that covered up the fact that the Ducati was a better bike. They could still win a world championship or two with him, even against the V4, because they had the Jonathan Rea factor. BMW has that with Toprak right now. Bulliga arguably gives that to Ducati as well. The Ducati's the best bike on the grid, but Bulliga gets that little bit more out of it than the other riders right now. So you need to have that X factor to be able to win world championships. And that's the one thing that BMW have learned from working with Toprak for 2 years.
When that X factor is a couple of seconds over a race, you can more or less question as well if it's necessarily the best approach. But when it's 16 seconds, really is, there is no uncertainty in terms of who is being able to get the best out of the package. So Toprak Razgatlioglu moves to the top of the time sheet. That is a 1:26.1, and it is his fastest lap of the whole weekend. It is cooler conditions than what we had so far, but good to see the reigning world champion get back into form after the issues he had yesterday, at least over that one lap.
It's an interesting one because Toprak said yesterday he couldn't stop. Obviously, whenever we look at replays of Toprak and we see him on track, you always see the big endo. We always see him braking hard, so you just assume that he's stopping well. But the problem for him yesterday was he couldn't stop and turn in. Typically, to do that, you need the engine braking working well. You need everything to give you that confidence. So even though you can brake hard, that's not necessarily stopping well. And for Razgatlioglu, fastest lap of the weekend so far. Alex Lowe's just moves up with his fastest time of the weekend as well. So the two riders that didn't improve yesterday afternoon immediately are improving their times now. Both of them were working slightly different programs yesterday, but for Toprak, hopefully that means that he's got the bike in the ballpark. We're about a half a second off lap record pace. Sorry, a second and a half off lap record pace right now, so still plenty of room to improve.
But Razgatlioglu already 0.3 of a second up on this next lap, so he should push that lap further into the 1:25. So going back to the BMW and necessarily some of the issues that Razgatlioglu has been having here this weekend, a big stopping into turn 12 there for the number one. Nothing out of the ordinary, but it still is quite extraordinary for those of us watching at home. We'll see the lap time that he can post here, and is into the 1:25 to 1:25.7, so no time lost there for Razgatlioglu. Going back to the issues that he had, we have also reached a new checkpoint in terms of the regulations, in terms of the fuel flow regulations this year. It has affected once again all the Ducatis and both of the BMWs, who have received another further penalty in terms of the amount of fuel flow that they have coming through the engine at any time. They are more limited than other manufacturers. It's the third time this year, and it hasn't been necessarily extraordinarily noticeable, certainly in terms of results for Razgatlioglu or for Nicola Bulega. But in terms of the feeling that these riders may have, the question is how much this is necessarily impacting a lot of the riders, because Razgatlioglu yesterday, speaking to the media, was in fact talking about how it has affected some of the approach to particularly on the back straight here at Donington Park, the sort of gearing that he might use, or where he can be when he gets to, for example, the foggy S's, or when he gets to turn one. Nicola Buleg has mentioned in the past it's a small adjustment, but it's enough to really be able to throw you necessarily off your edge. So how much really is this impact?
Yeah, one of the big things is that a lot of the times everything's on quite a knife edge to be able to get the right feeling, and a small change can have a big impact. And you see it more and more now because everyone's so on the limit. We saw that in yesterday's sessions just by the fact that 1 second separated the first 19 riders. It shows that if you make a small change that helps you find, you know, a few hundredths of a second, it can move you up 3 or 4 positions. If you find a 1/10 of a second, it makes a massive change to be able to push you further up the order. And just by making that change and finding that bit of time, it changes how the bike feels completely. It can suddenly feel more on a knife edge, or can feel more comfortable, and that allows you to push. But you're always on that limiting point. It was interesting to see down into the BMW pit box there. They've got Mikey's bike rebuilt already. We saw that they obviously had to change the seat unit and some other bits and pieces on the bike, but the teams worked very efficiently to do that. It looked like they needed to change one of the bars as well. So for that team, they've been able to show just how good of a job they can do.
Another mistake for Nicola Buller there, going into the Melbourne hairpin, and there will be another lap in which he cannot improve his lap. Well, he actually does improve slightly his lap time, but he remains third on the timing sheets. But we've seen a couple of mistakes from Buller in this session. He hasn't been able to improve upon his lap times from yesterday. Potentially also the cooler conditions catching out a couple of the riders. Here it is 27.5 track conditions, track temperatures right now at Donington Park. Much cooler than what we had yesterday, and much cooler than what we should expect for yesterday. Up to which point can this also lead to not necessarily representative feeling on track for a lot of the riders?
Well, it's going to feel a lot better now than it probably will later on, particularly for the races, but the teams and riders know what to expect for the races now as well. Yesterday gives them all that information. It's cooler today, but it's still got a heat haze coming off. It's still going to be feeling pretty slick out there, and 30 degrees track temp is pretty nice for these Pirelli tires, but in an hour and a half's time it will be hotter, and it will always get that little bit more slick, but you've just got to be able to deal with that. And these guys know what to do, particularly whenever it gets hotter and greasier, and that's where Petrucci was interested yesterday, saying that sometimes you just need to say a prayer. And I think that there'll be quite a few riders saying a prayer before the race, because it will be about managing that tyre. We saw Van der Mark, Lecwo and a few other riders really smoking it up through turn 8 as you get on the gas onto the back straight. You'll do that in the Superpole session, you won't do that in the races.
So we go to Jari Montella, Danilo Petrucci's teammate, and Jari Montella confirmed for the 2026 season with the Barney Racing squad. He's on a very fast lap here, could be on an X tyre, which is what they've used in the Superpole later on. He moves up to 3rd on a timing sheet to 126.3, so that is by far his fastest lap of the weekend. The number 5 yesterday posted a best lap of 126.9, just dropping to those 126s. So it's a big set from Montella, but potentially a lot of riders now going out on the XR and trying to get a bit of a feel for the Superpole ahead.
Yeah, and obviously for the Superpole session, the Q tyre as well an option, and for a lot of riders now just out there trying to find something they can. Jonathan Ray, we see here in the number 65 machine, on course for a good lap that should move him up into probably the top 7 or 8 times the weekend so far. We'll see what he can do in the final sector. He's struggled in sector 1 yesterday, really strong in that last sector, so maybe he's able to put in a good lap here and give himself a chance to move up into the top 5-6 positions in this session, which should end up putting them somewhere in the ballpark for a top 6 overall.
He didn't get a fast lap time yesterday. He was down 17th on the combined timing sheets, but he did have a big moment at the Melbourne hairpin during his fast lap, or what would have been his fastest lap. No moments here for the number 65, and he moves up to 3rd on the timing sheets. So we've got quite a few riders on fast laps now. We focus on number 31 of Garrett Gerloff, another rider who has renewed their contract for 2026 with the same outfit they're racing for, in his case the Kawasaki World SBK team, and he also moves up to 3rd on the combined time sheets. Meanwhile, Nikola Buliga, unable to improve his position, he dropped all the way down to 6th with this latest flurry of laps. Nothing to worry about, of course, on number 11. It still is free practice 3, but interesting to see a bit more of a mix of riders towards the top of the field, and a lot of riders at the very least gaining that little bit more confidence that they may not have been able to find yesterday.
Yeah, you can see there on the back end of Aguilar's bike, that looks like the purple stripes there, so maybe out there just doing a sim run now for the Superpole session, but we'll wait and see for Aguilar. Obviously for a lot of these riders further down the grid, it becomes critical to get that time and experience on that tyre to be able to qualify well.
Of course, I was mentioning the X tyre, but it is in fact the SEQ tyre that we have here this weekend for the Superpole, the even softer compound. The X tyre is available actually for the full races. And
given the issues that some riders are expecting with tyre life, if it's high track temperatures, that means also you'd be very surprised if in the Superpole race you're able to make that Q tyre last all the way. But they always surprise us in the Superpole race.
But there's always somebody who is available to make that gamble, and when you qualify further down the field in particular, or a bit out of position, it's something that a lot of teams will bear in mind, because there's not much to gamble with. Good to see Michael van der Mark back out onto the track after that crash with Tommy Bridewell. Unfortunately, the number 46 hasn't been able to return yet. Neither has Andrea Iannone, of course, although we can expect his session to be over given the technical issues that he did have. A few more riders on fast lap times now, and here is Sam Lowes. He's all the way down in 21st position in this session, but he could move right to the top of the timesheets. He does, a 125.6 for the number 14 and that Mark VDS outfit. So a fantastic lap once again from him, and potentially a sign of things to come in the Superpole session, as we alluded to earlier on. The number 14 one always to turn up the heat a little bit in the qualifying sessions. Andrea Locatelli is also on a very fast lap up to move originally up to the top 3, and he does move into the top 3 at 125.8. So a lot of riders starting to find a little bit of pace over one lap.
Yeah, obviously at this stage of the weekend, not these set times don't count for anything, but it gives you that bit of confidence lift if you're looking for it. Really important for Ryan Vickers to put in another fast lap there, 4th fastest of the weekend. And for Vickers, this is a big weekend, because this is an opportunity for him to show everyone what he can do. Obviously Donington's a track that he knows well from his BSB days, but you need to be able to have that end product. He needs to be able to come away with something first. Looks like the yellow flags were out there at turn 11. It looked like it might have been one of the MIE Hondas that had ran off the track at the Melbourne Loop just in the back of the shot. But for Nikola Buliga, obviously still one of those situations. He's trying to find a bit of an improvement now, but not going to be a time that's going to challenge at the top of the time. So Buliga just consistently running in those mid-26s right now, and good race pace for Nico at this stage.
That crash at turn 11 was Ivo Lopez on the MIE Honda, but he is back out on track, so it would have been just a slow one at the penultimate corner of the track. That right-hander that leads you just before the final corner of the track onto the start-finish straight. So the yellow flags have gone, are no longer on track, so these laps will count. Axel Bassani on course to move up the timesheet as well. He is down in 16th, could move up to 9th, eventually moves up to 11th position, so a step forward for the number 47, just 0.8 of a second off the fastest lap time that Sam Lowe's has set in this free practice 3 session. All of the top 13 riders on the timing sheet have set their fastest lap time of the weekend in this session. It's only Danilo Petrucci down in 14th who's been unable to improve upon what he did yesterday. This is Ivo Lopez, the rider who just crashed a few moments ago, so good to see him back in the pit box, but that will be his session over for the number 75, coming into World Superbike this weekend just to replace Zach Lansaidi, who had other commitments this weekend with the Asian Superbike Championship. MIE Honda, of course, with 2 different riders this weekend. Tito Rabatos coming in to replace Taryn McKenzie, who departed from the team after the Misano round, after 1.5 years with the team. So final fastest laps of this session underway. Here is Alex Lowe's on the number 22 Bimotor bike. He will move provisionally up to first position if he got this final sector right, and he does a 125.3, so we're slowly getting closer to what that lap record was last year and slowly getting closer to what we could expect in the Superpole session. Here's the Mark VDS box. We go back and forth between the garages of both of the Lowe's twins, but it is Toprak Razgatlioglu who is on a fast lap right now. He will get this 1 lap, potentially 1 more around this Donington Park circuit. We saw him leave pit lane a few moments ago. Interesting to see where the reigning world champion can set the pace. There's Toprak Razgatlioglu. He actually...
Toprak was up by 1/10 of a second in the first sector, lost time in the second sector, and then by the end of the lap pretty much matched his own pace, so about 4/10 of a second off Alex Lowe's fastest time. But time for 1 more lap left in the session. This is good to see from Iannone able to get himself out there. We saw Van der Mark leave the pits as well, and Tommy Bridewell wasn't able to get back out, but important for the likes of Van der Mark or Iannone now to be able to just get out there and just make sure everything can do a full systems check before the Superpole session.
Of course, our timing system does seem to be having some issues with the 3rd sector, but Alex Lowe's was up when we crossed the 2nd split by 0.2 of a second, full 1/4 of a second, in fact, over his brother Sam Lowe's. We'll see what he can do now. Number 22 is turn around the final corner now. We should see him in a couple of seconds' time. Here he is. What can he do at the end of this free practice 3 session? Checkered flag is out, and he does move to the top of the timesheet. It's a 125.3.
Yeah, he had lost his previous fastest time for exceeding track limits, but matches the time now as well. So good consistency there from Alex to end the session.
Not a lot of riders on fast laps now. It is Toprak Razgatlioglu, the only one who is on course to improve upon their personal best lap time. He shouldn't move up in position, but we'll see what you can do coming around the final corner for Toprak.
Just for Toprak as well, in that 3rd sector he's losing 0.3 of a second to Lowe's, and that's where they'll be looking to find some improvements in terms of their ideal times during the course of the rest of the morning, just before the Superpole session, within 1/3 of a second though of the fastest time, and we'll see what they're able to do once we get to the Superpole session.
And just a word on Andrea Iannone, who actually did manage to return to the track towards the end of that session. Didn't set a lap time, but good to see that Team Go 11 get the bike on track in time to just get that 1 out lap.
Yeah, he left the pits with about 7 seconds left in the session, so it's just a case of being able to go and do that installation lap and then come round, maybe do a practice start, and then just get yourself ready for the Superpole session.
Yeah, unfortunately, Tommy Bridewell wasn't able to return to the track after that crash that he had with Michael van der Mark at the start of the session that brought the red flags out here at Donington Park. So that is the end of the session, and we do have a Lowe's 1-2 at the top of the timing sheets, both for this free practice 3 session and on the combined results for this weekend. Also a British 1-2 just in time for the Superpole later on today. Will be the pit they will open for that session at 11 o'clock local time, so just an hour.